There are notes that aren't meant to be read. They're written to exist in silence, until someone finds them. And when that happens, everything changes. I'm going to tell you the story of Rebecca Taylor and Maya Chen, two women who had been best friends for 12 years, sharing coffee afternoons in the streets of Greenwich Village, trusting each other with their deepest secrets, not knowing that between them lay a buried truth. Rebecca arrived at her Aunt Helen's studio to sort through her things after her death. Among old books and yellowed blueprints, she found a hidden note. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Maya's. The words said, "I loved you when I shouldn't have. I chose you when I couldn't." When Rebecca saw Maya again, everything was different. Glances lasted too long. Silences weighed more than words. And Rebecca began to feel something she had been denying for years without knowing it, because that note didn't just reveal Maya's feelings. It revealed a truth about Rebecca herself. A truth she had buried so deep she believed it never existed. This isn't just a story about friendship. It's a story about hidden love, about truths that weigh more than lies, and about two women who had to find the courage to be honest, even if it meant losing everything. Stay with me until the end to know this story. See you soon. Rebecca folded the note with trembling hands and tucked it into her jeans pocket. She couldn't breathe. The words written in blue ink, with that elegant handwriting she'd recognize anywhere, had just shattered everything she thought she knew about her life. I loved you when I shouldn't have. I chose you when I couldn't. And now all I have left is this paper to say what my mouth never could. The signature at the end wasn't necessary. Rebecca knew exactly who had written those lines. And the worst part was that she couldn't remember when, why, or at what moment Maya had left that note in her late aunt's studio. Dust floated in the air of the studio like ash suspended in time. Rebecca had arrived that February morning intending to sort through her Aunt Helen's files, who had died 3 months earlier, leaving her this space filled with architectural blueprints, old books, and memories of a life dedicated to design. Light slanted through the wooden blinds, creating golden lines across the hardwood floor. Everything smelled of old paper and that lavender perfume her aunt used religiously. Rebecca wore a faded denim shirt and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was 34 years old, but in that moment, she felt like a little girl lost in a maze of unanswered questions. Her brown eyes, normally calm and calculating, now reflected an internal storm she couldn't control. The note had appeared between the pages of a book about colonial American gardens. Rebecca had opened the book without thinking, just trying to make space on the bookshelf, when the folded paper fell onto her lap like a sentence. At first she thought it was just a bookmark, maybe a shopping list or a random address. But the moment she unfolded the paper and saw the first words, she knew her life was about to change forever. Subscribe now. YouTube prioritizes subscribers, and those who aren't subscribed miss out on future stories. Rebecca read the complete note 3 times before putting it away. Each word was a direct punch to her stomach. I never told you what I felt because I was afraid of losing you completely. I preferred having you close as a friend, rather than risk not having you at all. But every time I see you, I die a little more inside. This note is both my cowardice and my bravery. I don't expect you to read it. I don't expect you to understand me. I just needed it to exist somewhere, even if hidden among pages no one reads. The problem was that Rebecca had read it, and now she couldn't stop thinking about Maya, about her best friend of 12 years, about the woman who knew every one of her fears and dreams, about the person she shared coffee with every Thursday afternoon at the Blue Note, the small cafe in Greenwich Village where they always ordered the same thing, a cinnamon latte for Maya, a black coffee for Rebecca. Rebecca put the book in a cardboard box and stood up. Her legs trembled slightly. She needed air. She left the studio and walked down the wooden stairs that creaked under her feet. Her aunt's brownstone was located on a quiet street in the village, surrounded by cherry trees beginning to bloom and filling the sidewalks with pink petals. The sky was gray, threatening rain, and the air had that humid smell characteristic of New York City when it's about to rain. She walked aimlessly for half an hour. She passed Washington Square Park, where tourists took photos under the iconic arch. She crossed through Union Square, dodging children chasing pigeons. But her mind was miles away, trapped in an infinite loop of questions. When had Maya written that note? Why was it in her aunt's studio? Did Maya know she would find it someday? And the most disturbing question of all, did those feelings still exist? Or had they died over time, buried under years of safe and predictable friendship? Rebecca remembered the first time she met Maya. It was at an art exhibition at MoMA, 12 years ago. Rebecca had just finished her master's in architecture and was working at an important firm in Midtown. Maya was an art conservator, specialized in historical murals, and had been hired to supervise the restoration of some pieces in the exhibition. They met in front of a painting by Georgia O'Keeffe, discussing color application techniques. The conversation flowed with surprising naturalness, as if they had known each other their whole lives. From that day, their friendship grew organically. They started meeting for lunch, then going to movies together, then spending entire weekends visiting antique markets or exploring small towns outside the city. Maya was different from anyone Rebecca had ever known. She was sensitive, observant, capable of seeing beauty in the most insignificant details. She had a special talent for making Rebecca feel understood without needing long explanations. But never, in all those years, had Rebecca perceived anything more than friendship. Or at least that's what she believed. Now, with the note burning in her pocket, she began to doubt every conversation, every glance, every shared silence. Had there been signs she ignored, moments she misinterpreted? Or had Maya been so good at hiding her feelings that Rebecca simply never had the chance to see them? Rebecca's phone buzzed in her back pocket. It was a message from Maya. "Done sorting the studio yet? I made us breakfast burritos. Stop by my place if you want to eat something." Rebecca felt a knot in her stomach. Maya lived just a 10-minute walk from where she was, in a small but light-filled apartment on Bleecker Street. It was her refuge, the place where Rebecca felt at peace when the world became too noisy. But now that refuge had become a minefield. Rebecca didn't know if she could look Maya in the eyes without her face betraying what she had just discovered. She didn't know if she'd be able to sit in her living room, eat her breakfast burritos, and pretend everything was still the same. Because nothing was the same. The note had opened a crack in the reality Rebecca knew, and now everything felt unstable, dangerous, full of terrifying possibilities. Rebecca typed a brief response. "On my way." She put her phone away and started walking toward Maya's apartment. Each step felt like a decision. She could turn around, go back to the studio, burn the note and pretend it never existed. She could postpone the meeting, make up an excuse, buy time to process what she felt. But something inside told her that running wasn't an option. If Maya had had the courage to write that note, even if it was to hide it, Rebecca had to have the courage to face what it meant. Maya's apartment was on a third-floor walk-up. Rebecca climbed the stairs, feeling her heart beat faster and faster. She rang the doorbell and waited. She heard Maya's footsteps approaching, then the sound of the lock opening. The door opened, and there she was. Maya was 32 years old, with wavy chestnut hair that reached her shoulders, and honey-colored eyes that always seemed to be observing something beyond the obvious. She wore paint-stained overalls and a white cotton t-shirt. She smiled when she saw Rebecca, that warm and genuine smile that always managed to disarm any tension. Come in," Maya said, stepping aside. "The burritos are fresh, and I got those cinnamon rolls from Chen's bakery." Rebecca entered the apartment trying to act normal, but everything felt different. The familiar smell of sage that Maya burned in the mornings, the Frida Kahlo prints on the walls, the plants that filled every available corner. Everything seemed charged with new and disturbing meaning. They sat at the small kitchen table. Maya served the burritos on ceramic plates and placed a pitcher of iced tea between them. During the first few minutes, they ate in silence. Rebecca could feel Maya's gaze on her, as if she knew something was wrong. "Are you okay?" Maya finally asked, wiping her hands with a napkin. "You look off." Rebecca looked up. Maya's eyes observed her with that mix of concern and tenderness that always managed to disarm her. Rebecca felt the impulse to take out the note, put it on the table and demand explanations. But something stopped her. Fear, perhaps. Or the feeling that once she opened that box, there would be no way to go back. "I'm tired," Rebecca lied. "My aunt's studio is more cluttered than I thought." Maya nodded, but Rebecca noticed she didn't quite believe her. She knew her too well. They had spent 12 years sharing secrets, tears, celebrations. Maya knew when Rebecca was lying, when she was worried, when she needed space. And at that moment, Maya knew something important was happening. "If you need help with the studio, I can come tomorrow," Maya offered. "I have the day off." "It's not necessary," Rebecca responded too quickly. "I can handle it alone." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Rebecca never refused Maya's help. It was something that defined them as friends. They were always available for each other, without conditions, without questions. But now Rebecca was closing herself off, building walls that had never existed between them. Maya put her fork down on her plate and leaned back in her chair. Her eyes studied Rebecca with an intensity that was almost painful. "Rebecca," Maya said softly, "I know that look. It's the same one you get when you're processing something difficult. What happened at the studio?" Rebecca felt her throat tighten. The temptation to confess was overwhelming, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, she shook her head and forced a smile. "Nothing important," she murmured. "Just found old stuff from my aunt. Photos, letters, that kind of thing. Got me feeling sentimental." Maya didn't insist, but Rebecca could see the disappointment in her eyes. It was as if Maya knew that Rebecca was lying to her, and that hurt more than any uncomfortable truth. They finished eating in tense silence. Rebecca helped wash the dishes, grateful to have something to occupy her hands. Maya dried each plate with slow, almost meditative movements. When they finished, Rebecca looked for an excuse to leave. "I should get back," Rebecca said, grabbing her backpack. "I want to make progress on the studio before it gets dark." Maya nodded, but didn't move to walk her to the door. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, with a dish towel in her hands, looking at Rebecca with an expression that mixed sadness and resignation. "Rebecca," Maya called when Rebecca was already at the door. "If you ever need to talk about something, anything, you know you can trust me, right?" Rebecca froze with her hand on the doorknob. Those words, said with such care and vulnerability, almost broke her. She wanted to turn around, take out the note and ask everything she needed to know. But fear kept her immobile. "I know," Rebecca responded without turning around. "Thanks for breakfast." She left the apartment and practically ran down the stairs. She didn't allow herself to cry until she was back at her aunt's studio, with the door closed and the curtains drawn. She sat on the wooden floor, took the note from her pocket, and read it once more. Tears fell on the paper, staining the blue ink. Rebecca wasn't sure why she was crying, whether it was for Maya, for herself, or for those 12 years of friendship that now felt like a lie, built on unrequited feelings and insufficient courage. Rain began to fall outside, hitting the windows with a constant and melancholic rhythm. Rebecca hugged her knees and closed her eyes, trying to understand what she should do now. The note had opened a door that should never have been opened, and on the other side was a universe of terrifying possibilities. Pain, loss, rejection, loneliness. But there was also something else. Something that Rebecca didn't dare name yet. A question whispering in the back of her mind. What if she had felt the same way all this time without knowing it? That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, listening to the sounds of the city through the open window, dogs barking in the distance, cars passing occasionally, the wind moving tree leaves. Her mind replayed every moment shared with Maya, looking for signs, clues, anything that would explain how she had been so blind for so long. She remembered an afternoon 3 years ago when they went together to Central Park. They had rented a rowboat and spent the day on the lake, eating sandwiches and drinking lemonade. At one point, Maya had taken off her shoes and put her feet in the water, laughing like a child. The sun made her chestnut hair shine with golden tones, and her honey-colored eyes reflected the light in an almost magical way. Rebecca remembered thinking at that moment that Maya was beautiful. But she had filed away that thought as something objective, almost aesthetic, without allowing herself to dig deeper. Now, with the distance of time and the weight of the note, Rebecca realized there had been many moments like that. Small observations she had dismissed, feelings she had catalogued as deep friendship, without questioning if they were something more. The way her heart beat faster when Maya called unexpectedly. The warmth she felt when Maya rested her head on her shoulder during movies. The inexplicable sadness that invaded her when Maya mentioned some guy she was interested in. Rebecca had had boyfriends over the years. Brief relationships, without much depth, that ended for reasons she could never fully explain. There was always something missing. A connection that didn't materialize. An emotional intimacy that never arrived. Now she understood why. Because the only person she truly felt connected to, the only one she could be completely herself with, was Maya. But recognizing that didn't make things easier. In fact, it complicated them enormously. Rebecca had built her life on certainties. Her career as an architect, her predictable social circle, her unshakable friendship with Maya. And now all those certainties were crumbling, revealing unstable ground she didn't know how to navigate. At 6 a.m, Rebecca got up from bed without having rested for a minute. She made strong coffee and sat by her apartment window, watching the city wake up slowly. The streets of the village began to fill with life. Street vendors setting up their stands, students walking to school, elderly people doing their morning walk. Rebecca took out her sketchbook, the one she always carried to make architectural sketches. But instead of drawing buildings, she began to write. She wrote everything she felt, everything she thought, all the questions she didn't have the courage to ask out loud. The pages quickly filled with her irregular and urgent handwriting, as if putting her thoughts on paper could somehow give them order and meaning. When she finished, she read what she had written. It was chaos of contradictory emotions, fear and hope, denial and acceptance, pain and curiosity. But in the middle of all that chaos, a truth began to emerge with clarity. Rebecca needed to talk to Maya. She needed to show her the note. She needed to ask when she wrote it, why she hid it, if those feelings still meant anything. But there was a problem. Rebecca didn't know if she was ready to hear the answers. Because depending on what Maya said, her life could change in 2 radically different ways. They could become strangers, lose the friendship they valued so much, or they could discover that they had both been feeling the same thing all this time, too scared to admit it. And Rebecca didn't know which scenario terrified her more. The following days were meticulously orchestrated torture. Rebecca continued going to her aunt's studio every morning, organizing documents, classifying books, emptying drawers. But her mind was elsewhere, trapped in an infinite loop of the same question. What do I do with the note? Maya called her Wednesday afternoon. Rebecca saw her name light up on the phone screen, and it took 5 rings to decide to answer. "Hello?" Rebecca responded, trying to sound casual. "Hey," Maya said from the other end. "Just wanted to know if you're still alive. You haven't answered my texts in 2 days." Rebecca looked at her phone and saw 3 unread messages from Maya. One asking how she was doing with the studio. Another sharing a photo of a mural she was restoring. The last one was just a coffee emoji, an implicit invitation to their Thursday ritual. "Sorry," Rebecca lied. "I've been swamped. You know how it is clearing out a house full of stuff." There was silence on the other end. Rebecca could imagine Maya in her workshop, surrounded by brushes and pigments, with that concentrated expression she got when working on a delicate detail. "Rebecca," Maya finally said, and her voice sounded more serious than usual. "Did I do something wrong?" The question hit Rebecca like a punch to the stomach. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because you've been weird since Monday," Maya responded. "And I know you said you were just tired, but I know you. Something happened, and you won't tell me." Rebecca closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose with her fingers. She hated lying to Maya. In 12 years of friendship, she had never hidden something important from her. But this was different. This could destroy everything they had. "Nothing happened," Rebecca insisted. "Really, I'm just processing my aunt's death, that's all." Another silence. This one was longer, heavier. Rebecca could feel Maya's doubt traveling through the phone line like an electric current. "Okay," Maya finally said, though her voice betrayed that she didn't believe her. "If you need space, I understand. Just don't disappear, okay?" "I won't disappear," Rebecca promised, though she wasn't sure she could keep it. They hung up. Rebecca stayed sitting on the studio floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes, with her phone in hand and a crushing weight on her chest. Maya was right to worry. Rebecca was pulling away, building walls where there had only been open doors before. But she didn't know how to stop doing it. The note had poisoned everything. Every conversation with Maya felt like walking on broken glass, careful not to say anything that would reveal what she knew. Thursday arrived and Rebecca broke their tradition for the first time in years. She didn't go to the Blue Note to have coffee with Maya. Instead, she sent a brief message. "Can't make it today. Work meeting." Another lie. Rebecca was becoming someone she didn't recognize, someone capable of lying to the person who mattered most to her in the world. Maya responded with a simple "okay," followed by a thumbs-up emoji. But Rebecca knew that behind that message was disappointment, confusion, maybe even pain. And that was destroying her, but not enough to do something about it. Friday night, Rebecca found herself in her apartment, sitting on the couch with a glass of red wine in hand, staring at the note she had left on the coffee table. She had read it so many times she could recite every word from memory, but she still didn't fully understand its meaning. Was it a confession? A goodbye? A release that Maya never expected anyone to read? And the most important question of all, when had Maya written it? Rebecca remembered that her Aunt Helen and Maya knew each other well. Maya had restored some antique furniture for her a few years ago, and since then, they had maintained a close relationship. Her aunt had even joked on some occasion about how well Rebecca and Maya got along, insinuating there was something more than friendship between them. Rebecca always dismissed it with an uncomfortable laugh, quickly changing the subject. But now those jokes took on new meaning. Did her aunt know something? Had Maya confided her feelings in her? Is that why the note was hidden in her studio? Rebecca poured herself another glass of wine and picked up her phone. She opened the chat with Maya and started typing a message. "We need to talk. I found something in my aunt's studio." But she deleted the words before sending them. Then she wrote, "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something important I want to ask you." She also deleted it. Every attempt to start the conversation felt inadequate, insufficient, too direct or too vague. Finally, she put the phone aside and lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The New York City night filtered through the windows. Neon lights from nearby shops, the constant murmur of traffic, voices of neighbors talking on the street. Rebecca felt completely alone, even in the middle of all that pulsating life around her. She fell asleep on the couch without realizing it, with the note clutched in her hand and the remains of red wine staining the edge of the forgotten glass on the table. Saturday dawned overcast, with that gray and diffuse light, characteristic of February in the city. Rebecca woke up with a stiff neck and a bitter taste in her mouth. She showered, made strong coffee, and decided she needed fresh air. Get out of her apartment, walk aimlessly, clear her mind of the whirlwind of thoughts that had kept her prisoner for a week. She went out to the village streets with no destination in mind. She walked down Bleecker Street, admiring the brownstones with their brightly colored facades and carved wooden doors. The neighborhood was quiet that weekend morning, with few people on the streets and most shops still closed. Without realizing it, her feet led her to Washington Square Park. She sat on a bench under a tree and watched people pass. Young couples holding hands, families with small children, street vendors hawking their wares. Life continued normally for all those strangers, while for Rebecca, everything felt fragmented and out of place. "Rebecca?" The voice made her look up abruptly. Maya was standing in front of her, with a canvas tote bag in one hand and an expression of surprise on her face. She wore jeans and a gray hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept well lately either. "Maya," Rebecca said, and her voice sounded higher than normal. "What a coincidence finding you here." Maya sat on the bench without asking permission, leaving a prudent space between them. The tote bag she carried had the logo of the farmer's market. Rebecca noticed it contained new brushes and some jars of pigment. "It's not a coincidence," Maya admitted. "I saw you from the other corner and decided to come over. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind," Rebecca responded, though she wasn't sure that was true. They sat in silence for a few seconds that felt eternal. Rebecca could feel the tension between them like a rope stretched to the maximum, about to break. Maya looked straight ahead, watching a group of children play with a ball in the center of the park. "Rebecca," Maya began, without turning to look at her. "I don't know what I did to make you pull away from me, but I'm sorry. If it was something I said, or something I did, please tell me what it was so I can fix it." Rebecca felt her throat close. The sincerity in Maya's voice was heartbreaking. Here was her best friend, assuming blame for something she hadn't done, apologizing for a distance that Rebecca had created alone. "You didn't do anything wrong," Rebecca said with a trembling voice. "It's just that..." She stopped. The words wouldn't come out. How could she explain what she felt without revealing what she knew? How could she recognize that she was scared without admitting why? Maya finally turned to look at her. Her honey-colored eyes were bright, as if holding back tears. "It's just what?" Maya asked. "Rebecca, we've been friends for 12 years. 12 years trusting each other. What changed? If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. The question floated in the air between them like an accusation and a plea at the same time. Rebecca felt the impulse to take out the note, show it, end the mystery once and for all. Her hand moved instinctively toward her jacket pocket, where she carried the note like a cursed talisman she couldn't let go of. But before she could do anything, Maya stood up abruptly. "You know what? Forget it," Maya said, with a mix of frustration and sadness. "When you're ready to really talk to me, you know where to find me." Maya started to walk away with quick steps. Rebecca stayed paralyzed on the bench, watching her best friend disappear among the park crowd. Part of her screamed to stop her, to run after her, to show her the note and demand answers. But another part, stronger, kept her nailed to the spot, frozen by fear of the unknown. Rebecca stayed sitting on that bench for more than an hour, looking without seeing, thinking without reaching any conclusion. When she finally got up and started walking back to her apartment, she felt more lost than ever. That night, Rebecca did something she had been avoiding for a week. She took out her laptop, opened a blank document, and started writing. Not a letter from Maya, nor a personal diary. She simply wrote everything she remembered about her friendship with Maya, chronologically, trying to see if there was a pattern, some sign she had overlooked. She wrote about the day they met at the museum, about their first lunch together at a Thai restaurant near Central Park, about the trip they took to the Catskills 5 years ago, where they spent 3 days exploring mountain trails and eating at local diners, about the countless coffee afternoons at the Blue Note, talking about everything and nothing. The more she wrote, the clearer something became. There had been moments when the line between friendship and something more had blurred almost imperceptibly. Like that time Maya had bought her a book on Italian architecture that Rebecca had casually mentioned months before. Or when Rebecca canceled an important work meeting just to be with Maya the day her grandmother died. Or the countless nights they spent together watching movies, with Maya asleep on her shoulder, and Rebecca too aware of the warm weight of her body against hers. Rebecca closed the laptop and covered her face with her hands. How had she been so blind? Or had it not been blindness, but active and deliberate denial? Maybe part of her had always known that what she felt for Maya was more than friendship, but she had chosen to ignore it, because facing it meant questioning her whole life, her identity, her assumptions about herself. And now, with the note as undeniable evidence that she wasn't the only one who had felt that confusion, Rebecca found herself at a crossroads. She could continue ignoring the truth, keep the note, let time bury the secret under layers of forced normalcy. Or she could be brave, risk everything, talk to Maya, and discover what was on the other side of that conversation. Sunday morning, Rebecca made a decision. She got dressed carefully, choosing dark jeans and a white shirt that Maya had always said made her look like an architect from a design magazine. She put on a little makeup, something she rarely did, styled her hair leaving it loose, and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman looking back at her. Or maybe she recognized her too well. It was the same Rebecca as always, but with something different in her eyes. A new vulnerability, an openness that hadn't existed before. She was going to go to Maya's apartment. She was going to knock on her door, sit down with her, take out the note, and ask her to explain everything. No matter what that meant for their friendship, for her life, for her idea of who she was. She needed the truth, even if the truth was painful. But when she arrived at Maya's building and was about to go up the stairs, she saw something that stopped her cold. Maya was coming out of the building, and she wasn't alone. A tall, dark-haired young man with a kind smile accompanied her. They were carrying backpacks as if going on an excursion. The man said something that made Maya laugh, that light and musical laugh that Rebecca knew so well. Then he took her hand naturally, as if it was something they always did. Rebecca stayed frozen on the sidewalk, watching the scene from a distance. Maya didn't see her. She was too busy talking to the man, laughing, looking happy and carefree. Together they walked to a car parked nearby, got in and drove away. Rebecca stayed standing in the same position for several minutes, feeling something break inside her. It was a sharp and surprising pain, as if someone had just ripped something vital from her chest. She had no right to feel this way. She had no right to be jealous, hurt, betrayed. Maya didn't owe her anything. She could go out with whoever she wanted, be with whoever she wanted. She was a free, single, beautiful woman. Of course there were men interested in her. But the note, the damn note that spoke of, contained love and painful decisions. When had Maya written it? Before meeting this man? Or was it recent, written in a moment of vulnerability, but without real weight behind the words? Rebecca turned around and started walking without direction. Her feet led her back to her aunt's studio, that space full of dust and memory where everything had begun. She locked herself inside, closed the curtains, and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She took the note from her pocket and looked at it for a long time. The words she had read hundreds of times now seemed to mock her. I loved you when I shouldn't have. I chose you when I couldn't. Past tense. Loved, not love. Chose, not choose. What if the note was old? What if Maya had written it years ago, in a moment of confusion she had already overcome? What if Rebecca had been torturing herself over something that no longer mattered, while Maya moved on with her life, happy, with that kind, smiling man who took her hand so naturally? Rebecca carefully folded the note and put it in her aunt's desk drawer. She locked it and put the key in her pocket. She needed distance from that paper, from those words, from everything they represented. She needed to go back to her normal life, pretend nothing had happened, that she hadn't found anything, that her friendship with Maya remained intact and predictable. But as she left the studio and closed the door behind her, Rebecca knew it was impossible. You can't uninvent what you've read. You can't erase questions once they've been planted in your mind. And you definitely can't ignore the stabbing pain she felt imagining Maya with that man, building something beautiful that Rebecca would never have the courage to try. Rebecca walked through the village streets, feeling as if she were in a trance. The world around her continued its normal course. Street vendors, tourists taking photos, couples strolling, children playing. But for her, everything felt unreal, as if she were watching life through foggy glass. When she arrived at her apartment, she had made another decision. She wasn't going to talk to Maya about the note. She wasn't going to confess what she felt or ask for explanations. She was going to keep that secret, swallow that uncomfortable truth, and move on as if nothing had happened. It was the safest option, the most cowardly, the saddest. But in that moment, it was the only one Rebecca could handle. She lay down on her bed, closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, there were only images of Maya laughing with that man, holding hands, building something beautiful that Rebecca would never have the courage to attempt. And as afternoon turned to night and the city lit up with the usual artificial lights, Rebecca realized she had made a mistake. Not in finding the note, nor in reading it. The mistake had been believing that she could know something like that and not change. Because the truth, once known, cannot be unknown. And now Rebecca was trapped in a painful limbo between what she knew and what she couldn't accept, between what she felt and what she didn't dare admit. The note was still locked in her aunt's studio drawer, but its contents now lived in Rebecca's mind, engraved with fire, impossible to erase. And every day that passed without doing something about it, the weight of that secret became more and more unbearable. 2 weeks passed without Rebecca and Maya speaking. 2 weeks that felt like 2 years of forced and deliberate distance. Rebecca immersed herself in work with an almost destructive intensity, accepting new projects, staying late at the office, filling every second of her day with obligations that allowed her not to think. But the nights were different. The nights were hostile territory where there were no work meetings or architectural blueprints to review. There was just her bed, and thoughts that refused to give her a break. Rebecca had finished clearing out her aunt's studio. She had donated the books to a public library, sold the antique furniture to a collector, stored the important documents in boxes that now rested in her own storage unit. But the drawer where she put the note remained locked, and the key remained in her pocket as a constant reminder of what she didn't dare face. The architecture firm where Rebecca worked was located in Midtown, in a restored Art Deco building with views of the Empire State Building. It was a beautiful place, full of history and natural light, but Rebecca barely noticed it lately. She arrived early, before her colleagues, and locked herself in her office with black coffee and an endless list of pending tasks. Her boss, architect David Richardson, a 60-year-old man with a reputation for being demanding but fair, had noticed the change in her. One Wednesday afternoon, he knocked on her door and entered without waiting for an answer. "Rebecca," David said, sitting in the chair across from her desk. "We need to talk." Rebecca looked up from the blueprints she was reviewing. She had dark circles, her hair pulled back carelessly, and her white shirt had coffee stains from days before. "If it's about the Tribeca project, I'm already finishing the modifications," Rebecca said automatically. "It's not about the project," David interrupted firmly. "It's about you. Are you okay?" The direct question took Rebecca by surprise. David wasn't known for worrying about his employees' personal lives. He was a man focused on results, deadlines, work quality. The fact that he was asking about her well-being meant that something really bad must be happening with her performance. "I'm fine," Rebecca lied. "Just a little tired." David observed her with that penetrating gaze he had developed after 4 decades in the profession. It was the kind of look that dismantled lies and excuses with ease. "Rebecca, you've been working here for 11 years, David said, leaning back in his chair. "I know you well enough to know when something's wrong, and for the past 2 weeks something's definitely been wrong." Rebecca felt her defenses beginning to crumble. She hadn't talked to anyone about what was happening. She hadn't even fully processed her own feelings. But David's genuine concern made her want to confess, unburden herself, share even a fragment of the burden she was carrying. "It's complicated," Rebecca admitted finally. "I'm going through a difficult personal situation." "Do you want to talk about it?" David asked. "Not as your boss, but as someone who appreciates your work and your well-being." Rebecca hesitated. What could she say? How could she explain that she had found a love note written by her best friend, and that it had demolished her entire perception of herself and her life? How could she admit that she was terrified of her own feelings, of what they meant, of what they implied? "I found something," Rebecca said, choosing her words carefully. "Something that changed the way I see an important relationship in my life, and I don't know what to do about it." David nodded slowly, as if understanding more than Rebecca was saying. "Is it about that friend of yours?" David asked. "The art conservator who sometimes comes to pick you up after work." Rebecca was surprised that David had noticed that. Maya had come to pick her up maybe 5 or 6 times in all those years, always spontaneously, always bringing coffee or some casual excuse to spend time together. "Yes," Rebecca admitted. "It's about her." David was silent for a moment, as if carefully choosing his next words. "When my wife died 15 years ago," David began with a soft voice, "I found some letters she had written but never sent. They were letters addressed to me, talking about things she never told me in life. Important things. Things that would have changed our relationship if I had known them before. Rebecca looked at him attentively. David never talked about his personal life. He was a reserved man, almost hermetic in that aspect. "And what did you do?" Rebecca asked. "At first I got angry," David confessed. "I got angry at her for not having the courage to tell me those things in life. I got angry at myself for not having created a space where she felt safe to share them. But over time, I understood something. The unspoken words are the ones that weigh the most. Not the mistakes we make, but the truths we keep to ourselves out of fear." Rebecca felt a lump in her throat. David's words resonated with a painful truth she had been avoiding facing. "I don't know if I'm brave enough to talk about this," Rebecca admitted with a trembling voice. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," David responded, standing up. "It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Think about it, Rebecca. Life is too short to live with regrets." David left the office, leaving Rebecca alone with her thoughts. His words hung in the air like an uncomfortable truth that couldn't be ignored. Rebecca leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten to come out. That night, when she arrived at her apartment, Rebecca found something unexpected. On her building's doorstep was a pot with purple magnolia flowers. Next to the pot was a note, not in an envelope, but folded and tucked between the flowers. Rebecca recognized it immediately. It was the same paper as the note she had found in her aunt's studio. With trembling hands, Rebecca took the pot and the note, went up to her apartment, and closed the door behind her. She left the pot on the dining table and sat down, looking at the note without daring to open it. Had Maya left it there? Did she know that Rebecca had found the other note? Or was this something completely different? A coincidence that her anxious mind was turning into something more. Rebecca took a deep breath and unfolded the note. The handwriting was Maya's, without a doubt. But the message was completely different from the first note. "Rebecca, I don't know what's happening between us, but I feel like I'm losing you, and it hurts more than I can express. If I did something wrong, please tell me. If you need space, I understand. But please, don't shut me out without explanation. Our friendship means too much to me to let it die in silence. The magnolias are your favorites. I hope they make you smile, even if just a little. With care, always, M." Rebecca read the note once, twice, 3 times. There was no confession of love here. No secrets from the past coming to light. Just a friend in pain, confused, trying to save a relationship she felt crumbling without understanding why. And Rebecca realized at that moment how selfish she had been. She had been so consumed by her own fears and confusions that she hadn't considered how her distancing affected Maya. She had turned their friendship into an emotional battlefield where Maya didn't even know she was fighting. Rebecca took her phone and opened the chat with Maya. There were dozens of unread messages, coffee invitations, questions about how she was, photos of restoration work, bad jokes, memes, emojis. All of Maya's effort to keep alive a connection that Rebecca was deliberately letting die. She started typing. "I'm sorry, I can explain everything." But she deleted the message. Then she wrote, "Can we meet tomorrow?" She also deleted it. The words felt inadequate, insufficient for the damage she had caused. Finally, she wrote something simple. "Thanks for the flowers. Are you still awake?" The response came almost instantly, as if Maya had been waiting by the phone. "Yes, I'm awake." Rebecca wrote, "Can I call you?" 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then, "Yes." Rebecca dialed Maya's number with trembling hands. The phone rang once, twice, and on the 3rd Maya answered. "Hello?" Maya said, and her voice sounded cautious, vulnerable. "Hi," Rebecca responded. and she realized she didn't know what to say next. There was an uncomfortable silence. Rebecca could hear Maya's breathing on the other end. That familiar sound she had heard hundreds of times when they fell asleep while talking on the phone in the early years of their friendship. "Thanks for the flowers," Rebecca finally said. "They're beautiful." "I'm glad you liked them," Maya responded, and Rebecca could detect the relief in her voice. "I was worried you'd think it was an overreaction." "It's not an overreaction," Rebecca assured her. "It's perfect. You always know what to do to brighten my day." Another silence. This one was less uncomfortable, more charged with unspoken things but present in the space between them. "Rebecca," Maya began with a soft voice, "what's happening? And please, don't tell me nothing. I know something changed. I can feel it." Rebecca closed her eyes. This was the moment. She could lie again, make up another excuse, prolong the suffering indefinitely. Or she could be honest, even if only partially. "I found something at my aunt's studio," Rebecca admitted, "and it made me question a lot of things about my life, about myself. It doesn't have to do with you directly, but it affected me in a way I didn't expect." "What did you find?" Maya asked with genuine curiosity. Rebecca wasn't ready to answer that question. Not yet. She needed more time, more courage, more clarity. "I can't talk about it over the phone," Rebecca said, "but I need you to know that I'm not mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. This is about me, about things I'm trying to understand." Maya was silent for a moment. Then she said something that destroyed Rebecca. "Okay. You can take all the time you need. Just don't disappear completely, okay? Even if we can't talk about whatever you're processing, at least let me know you're okay once in a while." "I promise," Rebecca said, and this time she meant it. They talked for a few more minutes about trivial things. The weather, Maya's work on an 18th century mural, a documentary about architecture that Rebecca wanted to watch. It was a superficial conversation, but it felt like a balm on a wound. A first step toward reconnection, however small. When they hung up, Rebecca sat on the couch with the pot of magnolias in her lap. The purple flowers shone under the lamplight, beautiful and vibrant. Maya was right. They were her favorites. Rebecca had always loved magnolias, those resistant flowers that grew on village walls, surviving heat, cold, pollution, blooming with an almost rebellious insistence. That night, Rebecca slept better than she had in the last 2 weeks. It wasn't peace she felt, but at least it was no longer that suffocating anguish that had kept her awake. It was something more like a temporary truce with her own demons. The next day, Rebecca arrived early at work and found an envelope on her desk. She opened it and discovered an invitation to an art exhibition at MoMA. The theme was Conservation and Memory, and among the featured artists was Maya. The opening was Friday night. Rebecca felt a mix of pride and anxiety. Maya had never mentioned she was working on an exhibition. It was something important, something she normally would have shared with her with excitement and nervousness. The fact that she hadn't was one more sign of how much damage her distancing had caused. Rebecca put the invitation in her bag and made a decision. She would go to the opening. She would support Maya as she always had. And maybe, just maybe, she would find the courage to talk about the note. Friday arrived faster than Rebecca expected. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant black dress, the kind of outfit Maya always said made her look like an architect from a design magazine. She put on light makeup, styled her hair, leaving it loose, something she rarely did, and looked at herself in the mirror. MoMA was packed when Rebecca arrived. The exhibition had attracted art critics, collectors, students, curious people. Rebecca made her way through the crowd, looking for Maya with her eyes. She found her in the center of the main hall, surrounded by people congratulating her. Maya wore an olive green dress that reached her knees, her hair loose in natural waves, and a smile that lit up the entire space. She looked beautiful, radiant, in her element. Rebecca stayed at a distance, watching. And that's when she saw something that froze her blood. The man she had seen with Maya 2 weeks ago was there, standing next to her, with a possessive hand on her lower back. Maya leaned toward him and whispered something in his ear, making him laugh. Rebecca felt a stab of pain so intense she had to lean against the wall. This was a mistake. She shouldn't have come. She wasn't ready to see Maya like this, happy with someone else, building something that Rebecca would never have the courage to try. She was about to turn around and leave when Maya looked up and their eyes met. Maya's face lit up with genuine and joyful surprise. She excused herself to the people around her and started walking toward Rebecca with quick steps. "You came," Maya said when she reached her side, and her voice was full of emotion. "I wasn't sure you would come." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Rebecca responded, and she was surprised that it was true. Maya hugged her, a long and tight hug that communicated more than words. Rebecca closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel that moment. The warmth of Maya's body against hers, the familiar smell of her lavender perfume, the feeling of being home that she always experienced when they were close. When they separated, Maya took her hand. "Come," Maya said. "I want to show you something." She guided her through the crowd to a quieter corner of the exhibition. There, on the wall, was a series of black and white photographs documenting the restoration process of a historical mural. But what captured Rebecca's attention was one of the larger photographs. It was an image of 2 women working together on scaffolding, surrounded by pigments and brushes. One of them was clearly Maya, concentrated on a detail of the mural. The other was Rebecca, taking measurements with an instrument that Rebecca immediately recognized. It was from 5 years ago, when Maya had asked for her help with the structural dimensions of a building where she was restoring frescoes. "Do you remember that day?" Maya asked, looking at the photograph with nostalgia. "It was one of the best days of my life. Working with you, sharing something we both love, feeling that connection." Rebecca remembered. It had been a long day, exhausting, full of laughter and deep conversations about art and architecture. At the end, they had sat on the scaffolding with their legs dangling, eating takeout from a nearby deli, watching the sun set over the city. "I remember," Rebecca said with a soft voice. "It was special for me too." Maya looked at her with those honey-colored eyes that seemed to see beyond words. "This exhibition," Maya began, "is about how we restore not just art, but also relationships, memories, connections we think are lost. It's about finding beauty in the cracks, about rebuilding with care and patience." Rebecca understood. It wasn't just an art exhibition. It was a message. Maybe not directed specifically at her, but relevant nonetheless. A reminder that broken things can be repaired, that cracks don't have to mean the end. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said sincerely. "I'm very proud of you." The man who had been with Maya approached, interrupting the moment. Up close, Rebecca could see he was handsome in a conventional way. Symmetrical features, easy smile, kind eyes. "Maya," the man said, "the curator wants to talk to you about the centerpiece." "Oh yeah, sure," Maya responded. "Rebecca, this is Ethan. Ethan, this is Rebecca, my best friend." "My best friend." The words hit Rebecca with unexpected force. After weeks of distance and silence, Maya still called her best friend, still considered her a fundamental part of her life. Ethan extended his hand, and Rebecca shook it with a polite smile. Maya talks a lot about you, Ethan said. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Likewise, Rebecca responded, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. Maya excused herself and went with Ethan toward the curator. Rebecca stayed alone in front of the photograph, looking at that image of a happy day that now felt like it belonged to another life. She spent the rest of the opening wandering through the exhibition, drinking glass after glass of white wine, avoiding looking toward where Maya was. When she finally decided to leave, she looked for Maya to say goodbye. She found her in a corner, talking animatedly with a group of art critics. Rebecca waited for there to be a pause in the conversation and approached. "I'm leaving," Rebecca said. "It was a wonderful exhibition." Maya looked at her with evident disappointment. "Already? I thought we could go to dinner after. There's a group of friends going to a restaurant nearby." Rebecca was about to make up an excuse when she saw Ethan approaching again. The decision made itself. "I'm tired," Rebecca lied. "It's been a long week." The disappointment in Maya's eyes was like a knife, but she didn't try to convince her to stay. She just nodded and hugged her briefly. "Thanks for coming," Maya whispered. "It means a lot to me." Rebecca left the museum feeling like she had just made a monumental mistake. In the taxi back home, she looked out the window at the city lights passing in a colorful blur. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Maya. "I know you're going through something difficult. I just want you to know that when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Always." Rebecca closed her eyes and let the tears fall in silence. Maya had no idea what was really happening. She had no idea that every act of kindness, every understanding message, every show of unconditional affection only made everything harder for Rebecca. Because what Rebecca was beginning to understand, what she could no longer deny even to herself, was that she was in love with Maya. Deeply, irrevocably in love. And the note she had found, with its confession of past love, had only uncovered feelings that Rebecca had been burying for years without knowing it. But Maya had Ethan. Maya was building something with him, and Rebecca had arrived too late to do anything about it. That night, alone in her apartment, with the purple magnolias slowly wilting on her table, Rebecca finally allowed herself to cry everything she'd been holding back. She cried for the friendship she was losing. She cried for the love she would never have. She cried for the version of herself who had been so blind, so closed off, so scared. And when she had no more tears left, Rebecca made a decision. She was going to talk to Maya. She was going to show her the note. She was going to confess her own feelings. Not because she expected it to change anything, but because she owed it to herself. She owed it to Maya. She owed it to all those years of friendship that deserved complete honesty, even if that honesty was painful. But as she fell asleep that night, exhausted from emotions, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late, that the moment for truth had passed long ago, and now all that was left was to live with the consequences of her cowardice. If any part of this story feels like your life, the hype button helps keep it from staying silent. Monday morning, Rebecca woke up with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. Today was the day. Today she was going to talk to Maya, whatever happened. It didn't matter if Ethan was in the equation. It didn't matter if Maya had already moved on. Rebecca needed to close this chapter of her life, even if that meant opening herself to even greater pain. She dressed in comfortable clothes, jeans, a white cotton shirt, sneakers. She pulled her hair back in a ponytail and looked at herself in the mirror. This was her, without adornments, without masks. If she was going to be honest with Maya, she needed to start by being honest with her own image. Before leaving her apartment, Rebecca went to her aunt's studio one last time. She opened the drawer where she had kept the original note with the key she always carried in her pocket. The note was still there, carefully folded, waiting. Rebecca took it with hands that no longer trembled. She put it in her bag and closed the studio door behind her, feeling as if she were also closing a stage of denial and fear. Instead of going to work, Rebecca sent a message to David saying she needed the day off for urgent personal matters. Then she walked toward Maya's apartment. It was early, barely 8 in the morning, but Rebecca knew Maya was an early riser. She'd probably already be awake, drinking coffee, getting ready to go to her workshop. The walk was longer than she remembered. Every village street seemed to extend, giving her time to reconsider, to regret, to turn around. But Rebecca kept walking with firm steps. She had run away enough. She had been a coward long enough. When she arrived at Maya's building, she stood in front of the door for several minutes, breathing deeply, gathering courage. Finally, she rang the doorbell. Maya's voice sounded through the intercom, sleepy and confused. "Hello? It's me," Rebecca said. "Rebecca, can I come up?" There was a pause. Rebecca could imagine Maya looking at the clock, surprised that Rebecca was there so early, especially after weeks of distance. "Sure," Maya finally responded. "Come up." The buzzing of the door unlocking was like a sentence. Rebecca climbed the stairs, feeling her heart beat faster and faster. When she reached the 3rd floor, Maya's apartment door was already ajar. Maya appeared in the doorway wearing cotton pajamas, her hair messy, no makeup. She looked vulnerable, beautiful in a natural way that made Rebecca's chest ache. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked with concern. "It's very early." "Can I come in?" Rebecca asked. "I need to talk to you." Maya stepped aside immediately. "Of course, come in." The apartment was in its usual morning state. Empty coffee cups on the table, open books on the couch, the smell of sage mixed with fresh coffee. It was a space Rebecca knew as well as her own, a place where she had always felt welcome. "Do you want coffee?" Maya offered, heading to the kitchen. "No," Rebecca responded. "I just need you to sit down and listen to me, please." The serious tone in Rebecca's voice made Maya stop in her tracks. She slowly turned around and observed Rebecca with a mix of concern and curiosity. She sat on the couch, making space among the books, and Rebecca sat across from her in the individual chair. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. Rebecca could see all the questions in Maya's eyes, all the concerns, all the fears about what Rebecca was about to say. A few weeks ago, Rebecca began with a trembling voice. "When I was sorting out my aunt's studio, I found something that changed everything for me." Rebecca took the note from her bag and held it in her hands. Maya looked at the folded paper with wide eyes, and Rebecca saw her face immediately pale. "No," Maya whispered, and her voice sounded terrified. "Where did you find that?" "It was hidden in a book," Rebecca responded. "A book about colonial gardens. It had no date, no envelope. It was just there, waiting." Maya brought her hands to her face and closed her eyes. Her breathing became irregular, as if she were trying to contain panic. "Rebecca, Maya began, but the words broke. "I need you to tell me when you wrote it," Rebecca said firmly, though her own voice trembled. "I need to know if these feelings are from the past or if they still mean something." Maya lowered her hands and looked at Rebecca with eyes bright with unshed tears. "Did you read it?" Maya asked, though the answer was obvious. "I read it," Rebecca confirmed, "many times. So many that I know it by memory." Maya stood up abruptly and walked to the window, turning her back to Rebecca. Her shoulders were tense, her posture defensive. Several seconds passed before she spoke. "I wrote it 3 years ago," Maya said with a barely audible voice. after our trip to the Catskills. That's when I realized what I felt for you, and it terrified me." Rebecca vividly remembered that trip. 3 days exploring the colorful mountain trails, sharing a room in a small bed and breakfast, laughing until their stomachs hurt, talking until dawn about dreams and fears. It had been perfect, and Rebecca had never allowed herself to think it meant something more than deep friendship. "Why did you hide it?" Rebecca asked. "Why didn't you give it to me?" Maya turned around, and tears were already running down her cheeks. "Because I was scared," Maya confessed. "Scared of losing you. Scared of ruining what we had. Scared that you'd reject me, and we could never go back to what we were. So I wrote it as a way to get it out of my system. I told your aunt what I felt because I needed to tell someone, and she suggested I write it down. She said it could help." "My aunt knew?" Rebecca asked with surprise. "Your aunt knew everything," Maya responded with a sad smile. "She was very observant. She told me to tell you that life is too short to keep important secrets. But I couldn't. So I wrote the note and gave it to her, thinking that if I ever had the courage to give it to you, I could ask her for it back. But I never did. And then she died. And I thought the note was lost forever." Rebecca felt everything click into place. Her aunt, with her silent wisdom, had kept that secret. She had left the note where Rebecca would eventually find it, giving them both a chance that Maya had never had the courage to create herself. "And now?" Rebecca asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "Do you still feel the same way?" Maya walked back to the couch. She sat down, but this time closer to Rebecca, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Rebecca," Maya said with a trembling voice, "I never stopped feeling what I felt. But I learned to live with it. I learned to settle for having you as a friend, because that was better than not having you at all. And when I met Ethan a few months ago, I thought maybe I could move on. That maybe I could have something normal, something that didn't make me feel like I was on the edge of a cliff all the time." "But does it work?" Rebecca asked. "Can you really have something with him when your feelings are elsewhere?" Maya let out a bitter laugh. "No," she admitted. "It doesn't work. Ethan is a good man. He's kind, he's smart, he's everything I should want. But he's not you, and every time I'm with him, I feel like I'm lying to him and to myself." The silence that followed was dense, charged with all the truths that had just been revealed. Rebecca felt as if she were standing on the edge of an abyss, about to jump without knowing if there was water or rocks at the bottom. "Maya," Rebecca finally said, and her voice sounded firmer than she felt. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me completely before responding, okay?" Maya nodded, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. Rebecca took a deep breath and began to speak. "When I found your note, it destroyed me," Rebecca confessed. "Not because I was mad at you, but because it forced me to face things about myself that I had been ignoring for years. It made me question every moment we spent together, every feeling I filed away as simple friendship without allowing myself to dig deeper." Rebecca paused, gathering courage for what came next. "And what I realized," Rebecca continued with a trembling voice, "is that I feel something for you too. Something that goes beyond friendship. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was always there and I just ignored it. Maybe it grew slowly over time without me realizing. But when I read your note and understood that you had felt the same thing, everything in my life crumbled and rebuilt itself at the same time." Maya was looking at her with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I've been terrified these past weeks," Rebecca admitted. "Terrified of these feelings, of what they mean, of what they imply about who I am. But more than that, I've been terrified of losing you. And in my fear, I did exactly what I feared most. I pushed you away. I hurt you. And I'm sorrier than I can express." Tears began to fall down Rebecca's face. She couldn't hold them back anymore. "When I saw you with Ethan at the opening," Rebecca continued, "I thought I had arrived too late, that you had moved on and I had lost my chance. And it hurt me in a way I had never experienced, because I realized that I don't just want to have you in my life as a friend, Maya. I want you in every possible way." Maya had become completely still, looking at Rebecca with an expression that mixed shock, hope, and fear. Tears ran down her cheeks again, but this time she didn't wipe them away. "Are you saying—" Maya began with a broken voice. "Are you saying that you also—" "I'm saying I'm in love with you," Rebecca interrupted, and saying it out loud felt like freeing herself from a burden she had been carrying without knowing it for years. "I'm in love with you, Maya, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if it's too late. I don't know if Ethan is in the way. I don't know if you still feel the same after all this time. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you, even if that means risking everything." The silence that followed was the longest and most intense of the entire conversation. Rebecca could hear her own heartbeat, the traffic from the street outside, the ticking of the clock on the wall. Maya was looking at her with an intensity that was almost unbearable. Then, without warning, Maya closed the distance between them. She took Rebecca's face in her hands and kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative, as if Maya were asking permission even in the action. But when Rebecca responded, when her hands instinctively moved to Maya's hair, the kiss deepened. All those years of repressed feelings, of unrecognized desires, of buried longings, came to the surface in that moment. When they finally separated, both were breathless, with tears in their eyes, but also with something they hadn't felt in weeks: relief. "Ethan," Maya said with a trembling voice, "is gone. I ended it with him 2 days ago. I couldn't keep lying to him. I couldn't keep lying to myself." Rebecca felt like she could breathe for the first time in weeks. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rebecca asked. "Because I thought you didn't feel the same way," Maya responded. "I thought you were distant, because it made you uncomfortable that I felt something more. I thought I had lost you as a friend and would never have the chance to be something more." They looked into each other's eyes, and in that look were years of friendship, weeks of confusion, and the terrifying and exciting promise of something new beginning. "And now what?" Rebecca asked. "What do we do now?" Maya smiled, that warm and genuine smile that Rebecca loved so much. "Now," Maya said, taking Rebecca's hands in hers, "I think we try to be honest. I think we give ourselves a chance. I think we stop being afraid and see where this takes us." "I'm scared," Rebecca admitted. "Scared of messing it up, scared of losing you, scared of not knowing how to be in this." "I'm scared too," Maya confessed, "but I think fear is worth it if it's with you." They kissed again, this time without the weight of the secret between them. It was different from the first kiss. This one was slower, more deliberate, more aware of what it meant. They spent the rest of the morning talking. They talked about everything they hadn't said in those 3 weeks of distance. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their doubts. Maya told her about all the times she had been about to confess her feelings, but stopped at the last moment. Rebecca told her about how she had been denying her own feelings for years without even realizing it. "Do you remember when we went to Central Park 3 years ago?" Maya asked. "That day in the rowboat, when I took off my shoes and put my feet in the water. I saw you looking at me in a way that made me think maybe, just maybe, you felt something too." "I was looking at you," Rebecca admitted. And I remember thinking you were beautiful. But I immediately filed that thought away. I told myself it was just an objective observation, nothing more. And when did you realize it was more than that? Maya asked. Rebecca thought for a moment. I think I always knew, on some level, Rebecca responded. But I didn't really admit it until I read your note. It was like all the pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was putting together suddenly fit. Maya leaned against Rebecca, resting her head on her shoulder as she had done hundreds of times before. But this time it was different. This time there was recognition, intention, promise. My aunt was very wise, Rebecca said softly. She left that note where she knew I would find it. She gave us this chance. We should thank her, Maya responded, even though she's not here anymore. They stayed in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the city continued with its usual rhythm. Street vendors, cars, voices. But inside that apartment, the world had completely rearranged itself. What are we going to tell people? Rebecca asked after a while. Our friends, our families. Maya lifted her head and looked at Rebecca. The truth, she responded simply. That we were blind for years but finally found each other. That we're something more than friends, and we always were without knowing it. What if they don't understand? Rebecca asked. What if they judge us? Then they don't deserve to be in our lives, Maya said firmly. Rebecca, I spent 3 years hiding what I felt for you. I'm not going to keep hiding now that I finally have the chance to be honest. Rebecca felt a wave of admiration for Maya. She was brave in a way Rebecca was still learning to be. You're right, Rebecca said. But I need time to process all this, to get used to the idea that this is real, that we're together. All the time you need, Maya promised. There's no rush. We can go as slow or as fast as you want. They spent the rest of the day together. They ordered delivery food, watched a movie without paying much attention to it, talked about everything and nothing. It was like their old afternoons together, but with an additional layer of intimacy and promise. When night came, Rebecca realized she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to go back to her empty apartment, away from Maya, back to the loneliness she had known all those weeks. You can stay, Maya offered, as if reading her mind. If you want. Rebecca stayed. They slept together in Maya's bed, with Rebecca being the big spoon and Maya curled against her chest. They didn't do anything more than sleep. But that level of closeness, of trust, of shared vulnerability, was intimate in a way that went beyond the physical. Rebecca woke up in the middle of the night and, for a moment, forgot where she was. Then she felt Maya's warm weight against her, heard her deep and regular breathing, and remembered. Everything was real. Maya was in her arms. They had confessed their feelings. They were together. Rebecca closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the pure happiness of that moment, without shadowing it with worries about the future. For now, this was enough. More than enough. When dawn broke, Maya woke up first. Rebecca felt her move softly, trying not to wake her. She opened her eyes and found Maya looking at her with an expression of tenderness that melted her heart. Good morning, Maya whispered. Good morning, Rebecca responded. They stayed like that for a moment, just looking at each other, assimilating the new reality they were in. Do you have to go to work? Maya asked. Rebecca thought about her office, about the projects waiting for her, about the responsibilities she had put on pause the day before. I probably should, Rebecca admitted, but I don't want to. Maya smiled and leaned in to softly kiss Rebecca's lips. Go, Maya said. Your work is important, but after, when you're done, come back. We can have dinner together. I like that plan, Rebecca responded. She got dressed in yesterday's clothes, which felt wrinkled and uncomfortable after wearing them so long. Maya lent her a jacket for the walk back. At the door, they kissed again, a goodbye kiss that promised more future kisses. Rebecca walked to her apartment with a feeling of lightness she hadn't experienced in weeks. The world looked brighter, the colors more vivid, everything fuller of possibilities. When she arrived at her office, several hours late, David was waiting at her desk. "Personal matters resolved?" David asked with a knowing smile. Rebecca felt herself blush, but couldn't help smiling. "In the process of resolution," Rebecca responded. "I'm glad to hear that," David said. "And Rebecca, just so you know, I don't care who you share your life with, as long as you're happy. That's all that matters." Rebecca felt immense gratitude toward her boss, toward this man who had shown more empathy and understanding than she expected. "Thank you," Rebecca said sincerely. "That means a lot to me." David nodded and left her office, leaving her alone with her thoughts and a mountain of accumulated work. But for the first time in weeks, Rebecca felt capable of facing it. She had clarity, she had hope, she had Maya. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Maya. "I already miss you. Is it too soon to say that?" Rebecca smiled and wrote back, "It's never too soon. I miss you too." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, blueprint corrections, and conversations with clients. But Rebecca moved through everything with renewed energy, a lightness in her step that her colleagues noticed but didn't comment on. When night came, Rebecca went straight to Maya's apartment. She didn't stop by her house first, didn't do anything except what her heart told her to do. Be with Maya. Maya opened the door with a radiant smile. She had prepared dinner, breakfast burritos, hash browns, coffee. The table was set with candles and fresh flowers. "You didn't have to do all this," Rebecca said, moved. "I wanted to," Maya responded. "I wanted to celebrate us." They had dinner between laughter and deep conversations. They talked about their plans for the future, both immediate and distant. They decided to go slowly, not rush, allow their relationship to develop naturally. But they also decided to be honest with their close circle, not hide what they were. After dinner, they sat on the couch with glasses of red wine. Maya put on soft music in the background, jazz that filled the apartment with nostalgic and beautiful melodies. "Rebecca?" Maya asked after a while. "Yes?" "Thanks for finding that note," Maya said. "Thanks for being brave enough to confront me. Thanks for giving us, this chance." Rebecca took Maya's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thanks for writing it," Rebecca responded. "Thanks for being honest, even if in secret. Thanks for waiting for me while I figured out what I felt." They looked into each other's eyes, and in that look was an understanding that went beyond words. They had found something rare and precious, a love that had grown from friendship, that had survived fear and denial, that now had the chance to fully flourish. And as the night progressed and New York City pulsed with life outside, Rebecca and Maya stayed in that small Greenwich Village apartment, building the foundations of something new and beautiful, something that had been waiting to happen for years. Because some stories don't begin with love at first sight. They begin with deep friendship, grow in silence for years, and finally reveal themselves when the moment is right. And this was their story. Imperfect, complicated, but deeply real. The first weeks of their relationship were like living in a beautiful and fragile bubble. Rebecca and Maya spent every free moment together, learning to be something more than friends, navigating the unknown territory of romance with the advantage of years of emotional intimacy already built. But the bubble couldn't last forever. The real world, with its expectations and judgments, would eventually find a way in. The first person they told was Sarah, Rebecca's younger sister. They went to visit her on a Saturday afternoon at her house in Brooklyn. Sarah was 28, married to an engineer named James, and had 2 young children who filled the house with noise and energy. Rebecca and Maya arrived holding hands, a simple but significant gesture. Sarah opened the door with one of her children in her arms, the youngest barely 2 years old. Her smile froze when she saw their intertwined hands. "Hi," Sarah said cautiously. "Come in." They sat in the living room while the children played with wooden blocks on the floor. Sarah made coffee and served it in hand-painted ceramic mugs. The silence was uncomfortable, heavy with unasked questions. "Sarah," Rebecca finally began, "there's something we want to tell you. Maya and I are together, as a couple." Sarah put her cup on the table with more force than necessary. "Since when?" Sarah asked, and her tone wasn't exactly friendly. "Officially, for 3 weeks," Maya responded with a calm voice. "But I think it's really been much longer. We just didn't know it." Sarah looked at both of them with an expression Rebecca couldn't decipher. Was it disappointment? Confusion? Disapproval? "Does Mom know?" Sarah asked, addressing Rebecca. "Not yet," Rebecca admitted. "We wanted to tell you first." Sarah leaned back on the couch and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there were tears in them. "I can't say I'm completely surprised," Sarah confessed. "I always thought you two were closer than normal friends. But part of me hoped I was wrong." "Why?" Rebecca asked, with her heart sinking. "Why did you hope you were wrong?" Sarah wiped the tears with the back of her hand. "Because I know how hard it's going to be for you," Sarah responded with a broken voice. "Mom is conservative, Rebecca. You know how she is. And people are going to talk. They're going to judge. I don't want you to suffer because of that." Rebecca felt a mix of relief and sadness. What she saw in her sister's eyes wasn't rejection, but genuine concern. "I know," Rebecca said, taking Maya's hand. "I know it won't be easy, but I can't keep living a lie just to make others happy. And Maya is worth any difficulty." Maya squeezed her hand, and Rebecca saw gratitude in her eyes. Sarah observed the gesture, and something in her expression softened. "Do you love her?" Sarah asked directly. "Yes," Rebecca responded without hesitation. "I love her, with everything I am." Sarah nodded slowly, as if processing this new reality. "Then I support you," Sarah finally said. "It won't be easy, especially with Mom, but if this is what makes you happy, Rebecca, if Maya is who you want to be with, then count on me." Rebecca felt tears begin to well up. She got up from the couch and hugged her sister tightly. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." When they separated, Sarah looked at Maya with a mix of seriousness and warmth. "Take care of her," Sarah said. "She's my older sister, but she has a more fragile heart than she appears to." "I will," Maya promised. "I promise you." James, Sarah's husband, arrived half an hour later. Sarah explained the situation to him privately, while Rebecca and Maya played with the kids in the living room. When he returned, James greeted them normally, even with an extra kindness that Rebecca recognized as his way of showing support. On the way home, Rebecca and Maya walked through the village streets holding hands for the first time in public. It was a small act, but significant. Some passers-by looked at them with curiosity, others with indifference, some with barely disguised disapproval. But Rebecca kept her head high, squeezing Maya's hand tighter every time she felt the judgmental stares. "Are you okay?" Maya asked when she noticed the tension in Rebecca's shoulders. Yes, Rebecca responded, though she wasn't completely sure it was true. I just need to get used to it. That night, Rebecca called her mother. She had planned to have this conversation in person, but her mother lived upstate in the Hudson Valley and couldn't wait any longer. She needed to get this weight off her chest. The call started with the usual trivialities. How was the weather? How was work? If Rebecca was eating well. But eventually, Rebecca gathered the courage to say what she needed to say. Mom, there's something important I have to tell you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Rebecca could imagine her mother sitting in her favorite chair, preparing for bad news. What's wrong, honey? Her mother asked with concern. I'm in a relationship, Rebecca said, choosing her words carefully. With Maya. My friend Maya. We're together. The silence that followed was crushing. Rebecca counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Together how? Her mother finally asked, though her tone made it clear she understood perfectly. As a couple, Mom, Rebecca clarified. We're in love. Another silence. This one was even longer. Rebecca could hear her own breathing, her accelerated heartbeat. I don't understand, her mother said with a trembling voice. You never said anything about this. Because I didn't understand it either, Rebecca explained. Not until recently. But now I do understand, Mom. And I'm happy. Happier than I've been in a long time. What about your boyfriends? Her mother asked. You had boyfriends before. I thought you liked men. I thought so too, Rebecca admitted. Or maybe I was just trying to fit into what was expected of me. But with Maya, it's different. This is real. Her mother sighed deeply, a sound loaded with disappointment and confusion. I need time, her mother said. I need time to process this. I can't talk about this right now. Mom, please, Rebecca begged. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out, her mother responded, but her voice sounded distant. I just need time, okay? Okay, Rebecca accepted, though it hurt. Take all the time you need. They hung up. Rebecca sat with the phone in her hand, feeling tears run down her cheeks. Maya, who had been listening from the couch, came over and hugged her. I'm sorry, Maya whispered. I know it hurts. It's going to be okay, Rebecca said, trying to convince herself. She just needs time. But as weeks passed without news from her mother, Rebecca began to doubt. What if time wasn't enough? What if her mother never accepted her relationship with Maya? Work became a strange refuge. David continued being understanding and professional, never asking more than necessary but making it clear that Rebecca had his support. Her colleagues noticed the change in her. She was happier, lighter, but also occasionally distant when she thought about the situation with her mother. One day, during a project meeting, one of the junior architects made a comment that Rebecca couldn't ignore. They were discussing the design of a residential complex when the young man, whose name was Brandon, said casually, "We need to think about traditional families. Mom, dad, kids. That's our target market." Rebecca felt her jaw tense. Families come in many forms, Rebecca responded firmly. Not all fit that traditional mold. Brandon shrugged. Sure, but let's be realistic. Most do. Most doesn't mean all, Rebecca insisted. And as architects, our job is to design spaces that are inclusive, not exclusive. David intervened before the discussion escalated. Rebecca is right, David said. We're going to consider diverse family configurations in our designs. Let's continue. After the meeting, David called Rebecca to his office. That was a good point you made, David said. Necessary, in fact. Thank you, Rebecca responded. It's just that I'm tired of the world assuming there's only one right way to live. I understand, David said, and I'm glad you're using your voice to change those assumptions. Rebecca left his office feeling validated, but also exhausted. Every day seemed to bring a new battle, a new situation where she had to defend her right to love who she loved. That night, Rebecca arrived at Maya's apartment. She had started spending more nights there than in her own place, and collapsed on the couch with a deep sigh. Hard day? Maya asked from the kitchen, where she was preparing dinner. More or less, Rebecca responded. I'm just tired of having to explain and defend all the time. Maya came out of the kitchen and sat next to Rebecca, taking her hand. I know, Maya said softly. It's exhausting, but what we're doing, simply being ourselves, is changing things. Maybe not dramatically, but in important ways. Rebecca rested her head on Maya's shoulder. Do you ever regret it? Rebecca asked in a low voice. Taking this risk? Never, Maya responded without hesitation. Not for a second. Rebecca, before you, I lived half a life. I pretended to be complete, but something was always missing. Now, even with all the difficulties, I feel whole. Rebecca lifted her head and looked Maya in the eyes. I love you, Rebecca said. I don't say it enough, but I love you. I love you too, Maya responded. And we're going to get through this together. They kissed, a long and deep kiss that communicated everything words couldn't. When they separated, Rebecca felt like she could breathe again. 2 months after the initial call, Rebecca's mother finally made contact. She called on a Sunday morning when Rebecca was in her own apartment doing cleaning. Her mother's voice sounded tired but softer than the last time. Hi, honey, her mother said. Can we talk? Rebecca felt her heart speed up. Of course, Mom. What do you want to talk about? About you and Maya, her mother responded. I've been thinking a lot. And I talked to Father Michael, my priest. I also talked to your Aunt Beth, who's more progressive than I am. Rebecca waited, holding her breath. And what I realized, her mother continued, is that I've spent 2 months without talking to my daughter because I was more worried about what others would think than about your happiness. And that's wrong. Tears began to fall down Rebecca's face. Mom, let me finish, her mother interrupted gently. I'm not going to lie and say I completely understand. I don't. But you're my daughter, and I love you. And if Maya makes you happy, if she's who you choose, then I'm going to accept it. I'm going to try to understand. Thank you, Mom, Rebecca said with a broken voice. You don't know how much this means to me. Can you both come visit me next weekend? Her mother asked. I want to get to know Maya better, not as your friend, but as your partner. Yes, Rebecca responded immediately. Yes, we'll come. When she hung up, Rebecca collapsed on the couch and cried. But this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. She called Maya immediately to tell her the news. See, Maya said with joy in her voice. I told you everything would be okay. The weekend upstate was easier than Rebecca had feared. Her mother was polite to Maya, making a visible effort to include her in conversations, to get to know her beyond the surface. It wasn't complete acceptance yet, but it was a beginning. And for Rebecca, a beginning was more than enough. On the drive back to New York City, Rebecca was driving while Maya looked out the window at the mountains extending on both sides of the highway. Your mom is strong, Maya commented. I can see where you got your strength from. She's complicated, Rebecca responded. But yeah, she's strong, and she's trying. That's what matters. Maya took Rebecca's free hand and intertwined it with hers. "I'm proud of you," Maya said, "for having the courage to live your truth, even when it's hard." "I couldn't do it without you," Rebecca admitted. "You give me the strength I need." When they got back to the village, the sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. They sat on a bench in Washington Square Park, the same one where Rebecca had avoided Maya weeks before. Now they were there together, openly, without hiding. "Do you remember when you found me here months ago?" Maya asked. "When you were pulling away from me and I didn't understand why." "I remember," Rebecca responded. "It was one of the worst days. I wanted to tell you everything, but I was so scared. And now look at us," Maya said with a smile. "Here we are, no secrets, no fear." Rebecca kissed her there, in the middle of the park, with people walking around. Some looked, some smiled, some frowned. But Rebecca no longer paid them attention. Only Maya mattered, and the love they shared, and the future they were building together. That night, in Maya's apartment, they talked about long-term plans, about officially moving in together, about how to combine their lives in practical and everyday ways. These were conversations that would have terrified Rebecca before, but now they excited her. "I want this to work," Rebecca said. "I want to build a life with you." "We're already building it," Maya responded. "Every day with every decision, we're building something beautiful." And as they fell asleep that night, Rebecca realized something fundamental. She had spent so much time worrying about what she had lost by revealing her feelings, that she hadn't realized everything she had gained. She had gained honesty, authenticity, the freedom to be completely herself. She had gained a love she didn't have to hide, and she had gained a future full of possibilities that she hadn't even allowed herself to imagine before. The difficulties would continue to exist. The world wouldn't change overnight, but Rebecca and Maya would face everything together, with the strength that comes from years of deep friendship transformed into an even deeper love. And that, Rebecca decided before falling asleep, was more than enough. 6 months later, Rebecca and Maya moved together into a larger apartment on Bleecker Street, just 3 blocks from where Maya lived before. It was a bright space on a 3rd floor, with large windows overlooking a community garden full of cherry trees and magnolias. It had 2 bedrooms. One they converted into a shared studio, where Rebecca could work on her architectural designs, and Maya on her conservation projects. Moving day was chaotic, but happy. Sarah and James came to help, bringing the kids who ran through the empty rooms, creating echoes with their laughter. Rebecca's mother sent money to buy new furniture, a gesture that Rebecca interpreted as a silent blessing. Even David showed up for an hour, helping to carry boxes and joking about how Rebecca had finally found someone who tolerated her obsession with perfectly organized blueprints. When everyone left and the apartment was in organized chaos of boxes and half-assembled furniture, Rebecca and Maya sat on the living room floor with a bottle of red wine and 2 plastic cups. "This is ours," Maya said, looking around with a smile. "Our home." Rebecca took her hand and kissed it softly. "Our home," she repeated, and the words felt like a promise. That first night in the new apartment, they slept on a mattress on the floor because the bed hadn't been assembled yet. But they didn't care. They stayed awake until late, talking about how they wanted to decorate each room, what plants to put in the windows, what art to hang on the walls. They were mundane but deeply meaningful conversations, the kind of planning that builds a shared life. Rebecca's work flourished in unexpected ways. David had given her the freedom to lead a new project, a housing complex designed specifically to be inclusive, with spaces that accommodated different types of families and lifestyles. Rebecca dove into the project with passion, using everything she had learned about breaking molds and challenging assumptions. Maya also experienced a professional renaissance. After the success of her Conservation and Memory exhibition, she had received several important commissions, including the conservation of a 17th-century mural at the Metropolitan Museum. It was work that could take years, but would establish her reputation as one of the best conservators in America. Coffee afternoons at the Blue Note continued, now with a different meaning. They were no longer just friends meeting to catch up. They were a couple, building rituals that would anchor their relationship amid the chaos of daily life. One Thursday afternoon, while drinking their usual beverages, cinnamon latte for Maya, black coffee for Rebecca, the cafe owner, Maria, approached their table with a knowing smile. "You two," Maria said warmly, "have been coming here for years. I always thought there was something special between you." Rebecca felt herself blush, but Maya just smiled openly. "It took us a while to figure it out," Maya admitted. "Ah, but the best stories are the ones that take time," Maria responded. "Today's coffee is on the house, to celebrate love in all its forms." When Maria walked away, Rebecca looked at Maya with tears in her eyes. "Sometimes I'm still surprised," Rebecca confessed, "by people's kindness, by the acceptance we find in unexpected places. And sometimes we find the opposite," Maya added realistically. "But I think for every person who judges us, there are 3 who support us. We just need to focus on the right ones." Not everything was perfect. There were still difficult days. Days when Rebecca felt overwhelmed by the pressure of being visible, of being a representation of something bigger than herself. Days when Maya missed the simplicity of when their love was just a kept secret, without the scrutiny of the outside world. But they had learned to navigate those days together. They had developed rituals of mutual care. When one had a bad day, the other cooked their favorite food. When both felt overwhelmed, they took a full day to disconnect from the world. Just the 2 of them, and maybe an old movie and a pile of blankets. On the 1-year anniversary since they found the courage to confess their feelings, Rebecca planned a surprise. She rented the same rowboat in Central Park where they had spent that memorable day 3 years ago, the day Maya identified as the moment she realized her feelings. They arrived early in the morning, when the lake was still calm, and the sunlight was just beginning to warm the water. The boat was decorated with magnolia flowers and rose petals. There was a basket with food prepared by Rebecca, sandwiches, fresh fruit, lemonade. As they rowed through the lake, Rebecca took Maya's hand. "A year ago," Rebecca began, "I told you I loved you for the first time. And since that day, every moment has been better than the last." Maya had tears in her eyes. "Rebecca..." "Let me finish," Rebecca interrupted gently. "I've spent this year learning to be brave. Brave to love openly. Brave to challenge expectations. Brave to build a life that's authentically ours. And you've taught me all of that." Rebecca took a small velvet box from her pocket. Maya brought her hands to her mouth, understanding immediately. "It's not a traditional engagement ring," Rebecca explained, opening the box to reveal 2 simple silver rings. "Because we're not traditional. But it's a promise. A promise that I'm going to choose you every day, in good times and bad, in ease and difficulty." Maya extended her trembling hand, while Rebecca slid one of the rings onto her finger. "Yes," Maya whispered. 1,000 times yes. They kissed while the boat gently rocked on the water, surrounded by the sound of musicians playing on nearby boats, by the singing of street vendors, by the pulsating life of Central Park on a Sunday morning. When they separated, Maya took the second ring and slid it onto Rebecca's finger. "And I promise," Maya said, "to love you with the same intensity that I loved your friendship all those years. I promise to be your refuge when the world is too much, and your adventure when you need excitement. I promise to choose you, always." They spent the rest of the day on the lake, eating, laughing, planning a future that no longer felt terrifying but exciting. They talked about trips they wanted to take, projects they wanted to undertake, maybe someday adopting a dog or two. When they returned to their apartment that night, exhausted but happy, they found a package at the door. It was from Rebecca's mother. Inside was an old photo album, full of pictures of Aunt Helen when she was young. On the first page was a handwritten note from her mother. "Honey, your Aunt Helen lived an authentic life, without apologies and without regrets. Now I understand why she kept Maya's secret, why she helped you both in the way she could. She knew that real love, in whatever form it takes, is too valuable to waste. I love you both." "Mom," Rebecca cried, reading the note. They were tears of gratitude, relief, love. Maya hugged her while she cried, without saying anything, just being present. That night, as they prepared for bed, Rebecca realized something. The note she had found months ago, that confession written in blue ink that had crumbled and rebuilt her life, no longer carried the same weight. Not because it was less important, but because they now lived the reality that the note had only hinted at. "What did you do with the original note?" Maya asked as they snuggled in bed. "It's stored," Rebecca responded. "In my desk drawer, along with other important things. I wanted to keep it. It's part of our story." "Our story?" Maya repeated with a smile. "I like how that sounds." The following months brought new challenges and joys. They celebrated their first birthday living together, Rebecca's, their first Christmas as an official couple, their first moving anniversary. Each milestone felt significant, one more evidence that they had built something real and lasting. Rebecca's inclusive housing project was completed and won several architecture awards. At the awards ceremony, Maya was there, applauding louder than anyone, proud of what her partner had achieved. Maya's mural conservation at the Met attracted national attention. A major newspaper did a profile of her, mentioning not only her exceptional work, but also her relationship with Rebecca. It was the first time their relationship was publicly documented that way, and although it was a bit intimidating, it was also liberating. "Look," Maya said, showing Rebecca the article. "We're no longer a secret. We're part of the public record." "And how does it feel?" Rebecca asked. "It feels like the truth," Maya responded. "And the truth always feels good, even when it's uncomfortable." On a rainy September afternoon, 2 years after finding the note, Rebecca and Maya organized a small celebration in their apartment. They invited Sarah and James, David, some close friends, Maria from the cafe. Rebecca's mother couldn't attend from upstate, but she sent a cake with a note that said, "For the love that found its way." During the gathering, David raised his glass of wine and proposed a toast. "To Rebecca and Maya," David said, "who taught us that true love sometimes needs time, sometimes needs a push from fate, but always needs courage. Cheers." Everyone toasted, and Rebecca felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost overwhelmed her. She looked around the room full of people who loved and supported them, people who had chosen to see their love as something beautiful instead of something to judge. When everyone left and only the two of them remained cleaning up the party remnants, Maya hugged Rebecca from behind while she washed dishes. "You know what's the craziest thing about all this?" Maya asked. "What?" Rebecca responded. "That if your aunt hadn't kept that note, if you hadn't found it, maybe we'd still be pretending to be just friends, too scared to take the risk." Rebecca dried her hands and turned to face Maya. "Or maybe we would have found another path," Rebecca suggested. "Maybe fate had other ways to bring us together." "Maybe," Maya agreed. "But I'm glad it was this way. I'm glad the bravery of a hidden note gave us the push we needed." They kissed there in the kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and food remnants, and it was one of those perfectly imperfect moments that defined their relationship. Months later, on a quiet winter night, Rebecca was working in her studio when she found something among her papers. It was an envelope she hadn't seen before, addressed to Rebecca and Maya in her Aunt Helen's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and found a letter dated weeks before her aunt's death. "Dear Rebecca and Maya," the letter said, "if you're reading this, it means you finally found the courage to be together. I'm happier than you can imagine. I've observed your friendship for years, seeing the love grow between you even when you yourselves didn't see it. Maya confided her feelings in me long ago, and I kept her secret because I understood that these things need their own time. But I want you to know something. The love you feel isn't something to fear or hide. It's a gift, a rare and precious gift that not everyone has the luck to experience. Some people spend their whole lives searching for what you already have, a deep connection built on years of friendship, trust, and mutual understanding. Society may try to tell you that your love is less valid, less real, less important. Don't believe it. Your love is as real as the sky above our heads, as solid as the mountains surrounding this city, as eternal as the art you both work to preserve. Live with courage. Love without apologies. And when days are difficult, remember that you chose this because it's worth every challenge. With all my love, Aunt Helen." Rebecca read the letter 3 times, tears running freely down her face. She called Maya, who was in the living room watching television, and together they read the letter once more. "She knew," Maya said with a broken voice. "All this time she knew and was protecting us." "She wasn't just protecting us," Rebecca corrected. "She was preparing us, preparing the path so we could find each other when we were ready." They framed the letter and hung it in their studio, next to the photograph from Maya's exhibition where they appeared working together. It was a constant reminder of how they had gotten there, of all the people who had believed in their love even before they themselves did. Life continued with its usual rhythm of highs and lows, triumphs and challenges. But Rebecca and Maya faced everything as a team, with the confidence that comes from knowing each other deeply, from having been friends before being lovers, from having actively chosen to be together each day. On quiet nights, they sometimes sat together on the balcony of their apartment, watching the village lights shine like terrestrial stars. And Rebecca thought about that day years ago, when she found a folded note between the pages of a book, not knowing that that little piece of paper would change her entire life. The note had been a hidden confession of love, but it had also been a planted seed, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And now, years later, that seed had grown into something beautiful and strong. A shared life, built on honesty, courage, and a love that had been worth the wait. "What are you thinking about?" Maya asked one of those nights, noticing Rebecca's thoughtful expression. "Everything," Rebecca responded. "The note, us, how something so small can change everything." "It wasn't the note," Maya corrected gently. "It was you. Your courage to seek the truth, to confront me, to take the risk." "It was us," Rebecca said, taking her hand. "Together. Always together." And as the city lights shone around them and the world continued its infinite course, Rebecca and Maya stayed there, 2 women who had found the most unexpected love in the most obvious place, in the deep friendship that had existed all along, just waiting to be recognized for what it really was. Their story didn't end there. In fact, it was just beginning. But they had already learned the most important lesson, that real love doesn't need to be perfect to be true, that courage is measured in small daily acts of honesty, and that sometimes the best stories are those we write ourselves, 1 page at a time, with blue ink on white paper, or with lives lived fully, without regrets. And so, in an apartment on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village, 2 architects of love, one of buildings, another of art, continued building their masterpiece. A shared life, authentic, brave, and deeply, irrevocably real. If you want the continuation of this story, write it in the comments, because that's the only way I'll know what you want. And don't forget that YouTube only prioritizes subscribers. So subscribe now, so you don't miss the next story that will make you believe in love and second chances. This is just the beginning. See you soon.